everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gov Tech Today. I'm your host, Jen Saha, and here we aim to bridge the gap between .com and .gov. Super excited. I have Becky Albin on the podcast today. Becky is a Senior Director of Systems Engineering at Software AG. And when you hear Software AG, when many of us hear Software AG, you jump right to Mainframe, which is going to be sort of what we're going to dive into today. But I've worked with this company for a while, and they do so much more than that, which I think was sort of essential, but also really smart on their part. We're going to dive into all of that with Becky. Becky, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure, Jen. Hey, thanks for having me on. So, as Jen said, I'm Becky Albin. I've been with Software AG for what seems like forever, but that's a good thing. I've been at Software AG for 37 years, soon to be 38. And before that, I worked for a federal government agency. And, my background is mainframes for a long time. And I've had various roles, starting off with the federal government. I was in computer operations. I did some DBA work. I did systems work. So it's pretty vast. And with Software AG, I've done everything from teaching classes to research and development to professional services to now systems engineering. And I've enjoyed the whole career.
Well, Becky, what I love about you and your background and sort of your position today is I don't see a ton of women in these types of high level systems engineering jobs, and just mad respect for that. But I'll sort of spin off on another project. I run a chapter of Women in Data for the state of California. Maybe tell me a little bit of what it's been like as a woman coming up in this sector of technology, and sort of any challenges or maybe any competitive advantages that you've encountered.
That's a tough one. And I'll go back to when I started. When I started, back in the 80s, there were actually more women in IT then than there were for a very long period of time. And I think with the whole STEM thing, there are more women getting into it. One of my friends, who's also a neighbor, her daughter is going to be graduating this spring with a cyber degree, cybersecurity degree. So I think she's going to have a lot of opportunities. But there was like a 30-year lag where women just kind of didn't get into the IT world. And I think now I hope things are changing because there's so many opportunities. It's a great career, and with all the AI stuff coming at us, it's going to be a game changer. And women need to have a role at the table or a seat at the table.
I completely agree. Couldn't agree more strongly, and I just love to see it. Okay, mainframe. You've been living and breathing it for over 3 decades now. Why don't you sort of give us the state of the mainframe today? Like, what are you seeing?
It's really a mixed bag. There are people who are just they're living and breathing mainframes, right? And they don't really want to move away. And we've had both commercial and state and government customers who are saying, okay, the mainframe is here, but it's got to coexist with the cloud and the distributed platforms. And the mainframe brings a lot of things with it, right? It brings stability, it brings security, it brings really unparalleled performance. And I know everybody says mainframes are expensive, and they are, I'm not going to lie, they are, but so is everything. We've had some customers who are moving pieces to the cloud. And as they move things to the cloud, they're shocked at how much it's going to cost them to go to the cloud. And then so they kind of take the less expensive route on the cloud, and then they find that they have performance problems that they never had on the mainframe because you're charged based upon the speed of the disk, how much memory you have, how many cores you have, all that kind of stuff. And when you first start talking to all these cloud providers, they're like, "Oh, it's so much cheaper." But now we're actually seeing more of a hybrid, and even some of our customers are pulling things back in shop because it was just not feasible to run it in the cloud for a reasonable price. So they found out that mainframe can provide good value.
Sure. I completely agree. I think what's sort of missed, and this happens to all of us, right? Like you see the next shiny cool thing and maybe it is at a great deal, right? Like we're going to give you awesome usage and it's going to be very affordable. But, like, what doesn't happen a lot, and government is particularly guilty of this, mainly because it's very short-sighted in their planning, right? It's the next budget cycle, whatever that is. The next budget is all we have to worry about. But that total cost of ownership, I think, is sort of overlooked when it comes to making some of these changes. So, I just wanna throw this out there for you. NASCIO, the National Association of State CIOs, partners with Accenture and does a cloud survey every 2 years. In 2021, this cloud survey found that 89% of the states that responded were still using mainframes. So 90%, right? And 71% of those reported not having moved any of their mainframe applications to the cloud. So I think this is government. It might be little more level of an adoption curve on the commercial side of it. But when I hear mainframes are dead, um, and then I see statistics like this, it's just like something's not driving here. Like what isn't aligning to where people aren't still looking at old faithful mainframes as a huge part of their modernization efforts.
Well, your numbers are really spot on from what we at Software AG see, because we have, of the vast majority of our customers, not all, but the vast majority are mainframe shops or a hybrid environment now. And some of them have been working for years. It could be 2, 4, 5, or 10 or 15 or even 20 years, moving things off of the mainframe onto a distributed platform, whether that's the cloud or just to a Linux on-prem or whatever. And those projects, they take a long time, and everybody underestimates the time and the money that it's going to take, because all of these mainframe applications, or the vast majority, were custom written to do a specific job, whether that's, with your citizens or with a bank or, an airline. These applications are just so integral to their day-to-day business. And when you try to rip that out and replace it with something that's more of a standard package, first of all, it never fits. So you're going to have to customize that package. And as soon as you customize that package, it causes all kinds of ripple effects, because when a new release of that package comes out, all that customization causes upgrade challenges. So it's just a never ending cycle of what ifs. What's going to happen? What do I do? Those types of things. But everybody's talking cloud, everybody's talking AI. And the cool thing is, IBM is on board with all that. They're talking AI, they've got mainframe in the cloud. So if you don't want on prem mainframes, fine, don't. You can go to IBM, you can go to other mainframe outsourcers like Insono, or there's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah, like mainframe as a service is now a thing. And I think that's relatively new to the public sector at least. And it's great because modernization change is inevitable, right? Like we are going to be changing, we are going to be using other technological solutions to our storage and data access needs besides mainframe. And this is where I get really excited about Software AG and the work you guys are doing there because, like, what are you doing about that? You guys haven't just been like, well, we're the mainframe company. We're not working on any of that other stuff. You should be on the mainframe forever. Like what you mentioned it, even IBM is doing this where it's looking at new ways to use these mainframes. So tell me a little bit more about what you guys are looking at there.
So, with our customers, we're providing them a lot of different options, because it really depends upon what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it. So, if they want to take their mainframe applications and replace them in pieces, there are options to do that. You can isolate your code for specific functions. You can move that off to the cloud or to a Linux environment, whatever. Um, One thing that we just talked about was the mainframe doesn't have to go away, right? You can use outsources. And that's one thing in particular I've seen a lot of our state governments doing lately is outsourcing their mainframes because they don't want to have that infrastructure in-house anymore. So you're seeing Kyndryl and Sono, NTT Data, and on and on and on hosting these environments. And then once they got it hosted, then they can start determining where they want the pieces to go. Parts of it may go in the cloud, parts of it may go to a Linux on-prem. It can, and the thing is, it can coexist, right? One part of the application can still reside on the mainframe, and you don't have to keep it green screen. We along with other vendors, we supply tools that allow you to modernize those green screen applications where they don't look anything like a green screen. You wouldn't know that it's not some new software package or whatever, but it's still got all that mission critical functionality that your customers demand. And you can consolidate. We've seen, especially within state agencies, sometimes those applications, they will span 20 or 30 screens or more. You're just constantly drilling screen after screen after screen. And what you can do with some of these tools that are going to modernize it and make it browser enabled or whatever it's going to be, you can consolidate multiple screens, lots of screens to a single browser page. It's just really phenomenal. And I think you've seen some that DMOS, who works in the systems engineering group, has been doing for a couple of different state agencies across the country. And we're doing it for some commercial. There's one customer in North Carolina that builds furniture, and we're doing the same thing for them. Instead of all the tracking of an order from the order taking to the build process and so on, instead of all that being on multiple screens, now they can go to a single browser page and with tabs get to everything they need rather quickly.
I think you're really getting to the root of what to me is really a successful modernization, and that's being focused on the user experience, right? Like me, citizen Joe Smith, when I go log on to the DMV, I don't care if they're using a mainframe. I don't care if they're using the cloud. I don't care if they're using the Department of Technology's data set. Like, all I care about is my experience and the ease of using those systems, the interfaces that I'm using. Like, that to me is where the majority of modernizations in government should really be focused. Now, we're talking about the building blocks behind all of that, right? Like, how is the data stored, accessed, used? What is the user experience, really, is what I think a ton of these modernizations should be focused on. So I cringe a little bit when I hear a CIO say, we got to get off the mainframe. We have to. It's just too expensive. It's too cumbersome, it's difficult to use. I'm like, "Hey, what are you guys trying to accomplish?" Because if it's just an interface that is easy to use for your clients, for the citizens, you don't have to get off the mainframe. In fact, maybe you should stay on it. Like, when has it steered you wrong? So many of these project failures, and they're plentiful out there, um, sort of get to the how and not so much the end result or the why. Like, why are we doing this? What do we want to accomplish? And more in the weeds where I'm like, let's leave that to the technologists, right? Like, let's just focus on what you guys want to achieve. So, this sort of leads me to like, where do you think the future of the mainframe is going?
I think the future of the mainframe is going to be evolving. And I know that's a kind of a generic term, but don't the users really don't care where their data resides. They just want it and they want it now. And there are tools from multiple vendors that will allow you to put a visualization or a virtualization layer in front of that data. That data can reside on the mainframe, it can reside in the cloud, it can reside on Linux, Unix, wherever, Windows, and it can make it appear as just a big giant data lake, for lack of a better term. And yes, the mainframe can feed data to the data lake and extract data from the data lake. APIs, you name it. The mainframe can do it all. And you talked about failed projects. We have worked with customers who have been trying to replace some of their mainframe systems for 15, 20 years. I They do. It No, it's a matter of not it's a matter of not understanding the business, what the business users want, and understanding the logic that the mainframe applications contain, because like I said earlier, they're mostly custom written. There's a few packages up there, but mostly they're custom written, whether you're talking DB2 or vsam or our database, it doesn't really matter. So you want to look at ways to enable that data to be used wherever it's needed. So you can make API calls back to the mainframe. The mainframe can make API calls out to the cloud. It doesn't really matter. It shouldn't matter where the data is. And we have customers who have literally wasted probably five, six, $700 million on failed project after failed project after failed project. And I'm sure you know who some of them are. Um, but they're not limited to one specific geography in the US. It's widespread, and it's not just governments. We've seen it with commercial accounts as well.
Well, I definitely think, it is something when you look at it, it's like the why behind it really comes into play, right? It's why? Why do you want to get off the mainframe? Well, it's hard to use. Is that a mainframe problem or is that like a workforce problem, right? Because so like you mentioned it, DB2. I get a call at least once a week from someone that's like, "Do you know any good DB2 programmers?" Because they're aging out. They're aging out of being in state service, of being readily available in just easy to get to service. So, I mean, that's another factor here, right? Is the workforce that is capable of working with mainframe. They're all retiring.
And look at me. Yes, I am not that far away from retirement. So, yeah, that's an excellent point. We hear it every day from customers. And we, Software AG and IBM and other vendors who work in the mainframe world, we are training up the next generation. I'm going to put a plug in. I was at IBM Share back in February. It was here in the DC area. And I was amazed at how many students were there from different universities, Marist College, uh, Boston College. I can't remember. Princeton had people there, but one of the more interesting ones was Northern Illinois University. I think they sent 18 students to share, and they actually have as part of their different offerings on degrees around information technology or computer science, whatever you want to call it these days. They actually teach mainframe at Northern Illinois University. They teach COBOL, they teach JCL, they teach assembler, they teach a lot of things. It's not the only thing they teach, it's just part of a bigger curriculum. And I think more people need to pay attention to that at the university level. But, Broadcom has a boot camp. I think Insono has a boot camp, and I think Insono told me they ran 200 people through their boot camp last year, and it's all about mainframe stuff because more and more of our customers are using these outsourcers, and so those outsourcers have to have people to go along with that. Because sometimes when you outsource only the hardware, and sometimes you outsource hardware and applications and maybe DBA and systems as well. It really depends upon what you want, but mainframe skills are harder to come by because we are all aging out. But I've seen a resurgence in younger people wanting to learn the mainframe because A, it pays pretty darn good.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, our .com listeners should really be tuning in to this part of the conversation because I do think there's a tremendous business opportunity for providing these kind of services among a younger, hey, you know what? Maybe we're not just teaching mainframe, maybe we're teaching mainframe modernization. And so you do have to understand COBOL and all the old school programming languages, but you also need to understand the APIs and how you access this information and how you turn it into something that is for tomorrow's government or the cloud environment working in conjunction with the mainframe and having sort of a hybrid environment, which I agree with you. I think that's where the majority of these organizations are going. And so, yeah, I mean, just like open your ears, industry, because there is a huge need for that kind of service.
A couple things around that. One is probably the really younger people aren't going to remember year 2000, but Y2K. Back then, COBOL programmers and assembler programmers were making fortunes. I mean, absolute fortunes because the skills were more plentiful than they are now, but everybody was worried about going from that 1999 to 2000. And COBOL and assembler programmers, if you were a contractor, man, you could clean up. They were just out getting outrageous salaries or per hour rates. And then the other thing is around that is a lot of people think that you can just take, I don't know what to call them. We just commonly refer to them as sausage grinders, but it's where you're going to take your COBOL code or your legacy code and you're going to run it through an interpreter. It's going to take that COBOL code and it's going to create Java or C sharp or something like that.
Well, today people probably think they can just do that with AI, right? Like drop it into ChatGPT. Like, just rewrite this, please.
Yeah, yeah, right. Not yet, not yet. Yeah, AI is not quite that smart yet. And the problem with these code regenerators or whatever you want to call them is that the code that comes out of there is sometimes just the worst code in the world to actually try to do maintenance on, right? And you're going to have to do maintenance because your application world is not static. It is constantly changing. Especially if you're working for a state, there's always new rules, new regulations, new this, new that. So, some programmers, they're making changes daily to applications. And once you run it through this recompiler or regenerator or whatever you want to call it, and now you've got this code that it's supposed to be Java, but it's not Java-esque. Try maintaining that. That's going to be harder than maintaining really good structured COBOL or some other, mainframe type application. So there's a lot of pitfalls to be aware of.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to like if you were to just translate an English sentence word for word into another language, you're going to get a bunch of puzzled looks when you go to spit that out, right? Like languages are different, the context is different, the phrasing is so different. And it's sort of the same thing with computers. Like my favorite is a very large state in the nation. This was probably back in like 2010. I'm dating myself a little bit here. We're going to go to the cloud. Cloud first, right? Everything's going to be in the cloud. And there was budget to purchase cloud and I said, "Okay, sounds great. Like where are your cloud migration plans or strategies or funding?" And they looked at me like, "What? What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Guys, this is not just like drag and drop. Like those sausage grinders as you call them, um they they cost money and they have a purpose and they need human intervention because it isn't one-to-one translation. And it was sort of like, yeah, we can go to the cloud, but like who's going to fund that? It's a ton of work, right? It isn't just drag and drop. And I think that's something that people sort of overlook as well is like translating those existing systems into cloud is a huge endeavor and I would argue it's one of the reasons that the majority of it hasn't been done, right? Like, we'll put a new application in the cloud. Sure, we can build cloud native, no problem. But like, all this stuff is still on mainframes, and making that shift is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and you made an excellent point there. Move and I don't want to make this sound trivial. Moving the data is not as hard as moving the application logic. And you just said that, it takes a lot of human intervention. And that's where, based upon my experience with many customers over decades is they underestimate the human intervention, and that's why projects fail. They were given a 5-year plan to go from here to there, and 10 years later, they're still like not even halfway through. And then 15 years later, and then finally, in a lot of cases with states, the legislature goes, "We've poured how many hundreds of millions of dollars in this, and we're still 5+ years away." And they'll just say, "Kill it, kill it." And then it'll die down for a couple years. Then there's new management coming in the legislature, and then within the different agencies, you always get turnover of CIOs and stuff, and everybody thinks I've got a new idea when it's actually been tried 3 or 4 times. And I'm not saying it can't work. It's just got to be properly planned for, and you got to understand the risk, and you got to budget those in.
which is really hard for governments to do because it is term limited, right? Everyone is dealing with the fire of the day, metaphorical or literal. And it's sort of like this long term planning, long term thinking. It doesn't really happen because of all of those things. Well, you've given me a lot to think about, and hopefully given our audience a lot to think about. Like the theme of this, I'm a huge mainframe fan. Mainframe is not dead, like, not even close, to dead, and still incredibly useful, incredibly reliable, incredibly secure, and something that, frankly, should not be dead ever, when you're looking at these massive modernizations. Any parting wisdom from you, Becky?
Well, I told you I was just at IBM Share less than a month ago, and then I didn't go last week, but I sent a couple of my guys to an AWS mainframe modernization session at Amazon HQ2 here in the DC area. And they came back with all kinds of notes. We had a wrap up meeting with everybody on the technical team. And, we were just talking about, because some of those players there are partners of ours. And so, we know that everybody's got to join somehow into the discussions around the cloud. You've got to, because everybody's going to be doing it. But just don't put all your eggs in one basket, and understand that it's an evolution, not a revolution. And talk to your mainframe vendors, because instead of ripping and replacing, there are tools that make your life so much easier. Like I said, taking green screens and making them browser based, virtualizing data so that your end users can go write their own reports. They don't have to come to you to say, "Write me a COBOL report," that's going to take a week for them to turn it around or whatever. There are like if you want to get your data in Excel, just click, 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 done. You don't even know where that data is. As long as you have the proper security authorization to get to that data, you can. So just talk to your mainframe vendors, because they can help you on your path to the cloud.
I think that's a really good point. A lot of people are afraid to talk to their mainframe vendors because they're like, no, we don't want to tell them that we're thinking of, getting off the mainframe. They'll be so mad at us and they'll raise our prices. And that's totally not the case because the smart mainframe vendors, and if you still exist, your smart mainframe vendor, have changed their business models to be helping you anything and everything mainframe related, not just selling you the mainframe anymore. So kudos on recognizing that, and I wish more people would. Well, Becky, thank you. This has been fabulous. I love everything you guys are doing over there. And I think I honestly like I want to get hats and t-shirts made that is like mainframe is alive. Mainframe is not dead. So I'll make sure you get one of those too.
I should have worn my Suffrage G shirt. We did them, I don't remember which year. It's been 5 or 6 years ago. We actually had T-shirts, because Suffrage started in 1969. A lot of people weren't even born in 1969. Same year that Apollo landed on the moon, right? We had T-shirts made that said "Suffrage, proud of our legacy," and then it had a punch card on it. And then within the punch card was one of those like eye catcher things, and it had 1969 in it. So it's very cool. The mainframe has a lot of legacy, and it's still viable. It's still the most stable platform. That's why almost every bank out there, all your credit card companies, all that processing is on mainframes.
All your governments.
Oh, your governments. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Becky. Tons of wisdom here for all of our audience. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.